Today he seemed to see her again, as he had seen her first at the castle of Fontainebleau, when he was but 15 years of age, and she still younger. They had been formally betrothed on that occasion by the papal nuncio in the presence of the French king and all the court, and he had returned to the Escurial bearing with him a little ringlet of yellow hair, and the memory of two childish lips bending down to kiss his hand as he stepped into his carriage. Later on had followed the marriage, hastily performed at Burgos, a small town on the frontier between the two countries, and the grand public entry into Madrid with the customary celebration of High Mass at the Church of La Atocha, and the more than usual solemn auto de fe in which nearly 300 heretics, among whom were many Englishmen, had been delivered over to the secular arm to be burned. Certainly he had loved her madly, and to the ruin many thought of his country, then at war with England for the possession of the empire of the New World. He had hardly ever permitted her to be out of his sight. For her he had forgotten, or seemed to have forgotten, all grave affairs of state. And with that terrible blindness that passion brings upon its servants, he had failed to notice the elaborate ceremonies by which he sought to please her did but aggravate the strange malady from which he suffered. When she died he was, for a time, like one bereft of reason. Indeed, there is no doubt but that he would have formally abdicated and retired to the great Trappist monastery at Granada, of which he was already titular prior, had he not been afraid to leave the little Infanta at the mercy of his brother, whose cruelty even in Spain was notorious, and who was suspected by many of having caused the Queen's death by means of a pair of poisoned gloves that he had presented to her on the occasion of her visiting his castle in Aragon. Even after the expiration of the 3 years of public mourn that he had ordained through his whole dominions by royal edict, he would never suffer his ministers to speak about any new alliance. And when the emperor himself was sent to him, and offered him the hand of the lovely Archduchess of Bohemia, his niece, in marriage, he bade the ambassadors tell their master that the King of Spain was already wedded to sorrow, and that though she was but a barren bride, he loved her better than beauty. An answer that cost his crown the rich province of the Netherlands, which soon after, at the emperor's instigation, revolted against him under the leadership of some fanatics of the Reformed Church. His whole married life, with its fierce, fiery-coloured joys, and the terrible agony of its sudden ending, seemed to come back to him today as he watched the Infanta playing on the terrace. She had all the Queen's pretty petulance of manner, the same wilful way of tossing her head, the same proud, curved, beautiful mouth, the same wonderful smile, as she glanced up now and then at the window, or stretched out her little hand for the stately Spanish gentleman to kiss. But the shrill laughter of the children grated on his ears, and the bright pitiless sun mocked his sorrow, and a dull odour of strange spices such as embalmers use, seemed to taint, or was it fancy, the clear morning air. He buried his face in his hands, and when the Infanta looked up again, the curtains had been drawn, and the king had retired. She made a little mow of disappointment, and shrugged her shoulders. Surely he might have stayed with her on her birthday. What did the stupid state of affairs matter? Or had he gone to that gloomy chapel, where the candles were always burning, and where she was never allowed to enter? How silly of him, when the sun was shining so brightly, and everybody was so happy. Besides, he would miss the sham bullfight for which the trumpet was already sounding, to say nothing of the puppet show and the other wonderful things. Her uncle and the Grand Inquisitor were much more sensible. They had come out on the terrace and paid her nice compliments. So she tossed her pretty head, and taking Don Pedro by the hand, she walked slowly down the steps towards a long pavilion of purple silk that had been erected at the end of the garden, the other children following in strict order of precedence, those who had the longest names going first. A procession of noble boys, fantastically dressed as toreadors, came out to meet her, and the young Count of Tirranivia, a wonderful handsome lad of about 14 years of age, uncovering his head with all the grace of a born hidalgo and grandee of Spain, led her solemnly into a little gilt and ivory chair that was placed on a raised desk above the arena. The children grouped themselves all around, fluttering their big fans and whispering to each other, and Don Pedro and the Grand Inquisitor stood laughing at the entrance. Even the Duchess, the Chimera Mare as she was called, a thin, hard-featured woman with a yellow ruff, did not look quite so bad-tempered as usual, and something like a chill smile flittered across her wrinkled face and twitched her thin, bloodless lips.